Hey, Eric Flexner, the old friend from Japan, talking about buying cars in the Japanese domestic market. So, Eric, a quick introduction. Who are you? What are you doing right now? And then we'll get into some questions about Japan back in the day.
Hey Jeff, long time no see. Um, my name is Eric Flexner. I am a Los Angeles realtor extraordinaire, and I live in LA,
Yeah,
Oklahoma. Okie
right.
boy who went to Japan.
Nice. Yeah, I was in Hancock Park the other day and I saw your face on a bench.
I've made it. I really have made it.
Yeah. So we'll set the stage here. So it's
All
like
right.
1994, 95, 96, right?
Yeah.
Yep. So Eric and I knew each other in 1994 in Japan. And so I drifted off my way. Eric figured out how to buy and sell cars in Japan. So first, where in Japan were you? And then we'll get into like kind of what you were buying.
Well, Jeff, you and I, we met when we were teaching English in northern Japan in Akita Prefecture.
Yep.
I learned the business in Tokyo. I had moved down to Tokyo, and I got mentored
By who?
what happened was I was working in the corporate Japanese world as a salaryman, and I didn't like it. Didn't like the corporate world, didn't like the Japanese business world, and didn't work out. I don't know if I was fired or if I quit or both, but one day I just walked in. Okay. I got fired and I walked out and I got on a train for nowhere, just started thinking and riding around. And this guy who wasn't Japanese walked through the train and sat down next to me, and we started talking, and all through our conversation, he was from Pakistan, and all through our conversation, every couple of minutes or 5 minutes, the phone would ring. He'd answer the call. He'd say something in Pakistani or Urdu, and then he put it down. After a while, I was like, "Man, what are you saying? What is going on?" He said, "Oh, every time I pick up the phone, I'm buying a car." And I was out of a job, and I said, "Hey, man, can you teach me how to do that?" And he said, "No, I can't, but I can teach you. I can introduce you to a guy who can."
Nice.
And so he introduced me to a great friend, still close. His name was Javed Iqbal. We called him JD. And he was just such a great guy. He had this, he had a family back in Pakistan, and he basically let me stay at his place, and taught me the ropes of the business, which was, all over the world. Most countries do not make cars, and Japanese cars are the primo cars as far as, being relatively inexpensive and high quality. And so the taxis of the world and commercial vehicles of the world, the vans, everything generally is a Japanese car, and specifically Toyota.
So the guy you met on a train was a broker.
He was a car broker, a used car broker to the world via the Pakistani network, which had developed all over the world, where guys and their cousin would go over and he would open up the Peruvian market, and another guy would be Chile, and another guy Pakistan and Kenya, and all over the third world. You'd have these cousins and these cousins of cousins opening up car lots. Mm-hmm. And then they'd have one guy in Japan driving around looking for used trade-in cars that were otherwise meant for salvage. In Japan, back in those days, you had this registration system that once you hit 100,000 kilometers, or about 65, 70, I don't know, 1,000 miles, which is nothing on a quality Japanese car, it was so expensive, it didn't make sense to re-register. You just bought a new one. it was the way the Japanese were dumping cars all over the world, was to really charge. They were forcing their own people to buy cars brand new. So there was no used car market. It wasn't worth it to re-register. So these Pakistani guys figured that out and started buying them up and shipping them out. And I ran into this guy, and he introduced me to JD, and JD showed me how to, which cars were the ones that were popular, that were purchased and that were wanted in Chile. Each market had its different stuff. The Chilean market, they wanted the Toyota Corolla wagons.
Nice.
Other markets wanted just the regular Corolla. They loved white. They didn't want anything red, black, green, whatever. It had to be white. Pakistan loved the Hilux truck, and Kenya, they love those trucks. You see them on the news sometimes.
Yeah,
guns.
Yeah.
The Hi-Ace, but it had to be open both sides, and
because that was going to be a taxi somewhere.
That was going to be a taxi somewhere.
So this was all going into the commercial market. It wasn't like wasn't the personal market.
Yep, and even buses, like you'd call up a broker and say, hey, I've got a 29-seater. He said, oh, I need a 26-seater. Even that small of a difference. So it was pretty sophisticated. I guess it had to do with importing and stuff like that.
Okay.
And he taught me the ropes. We would just drive around every day up to used car lots. And actually, there were new car lots. And then you drive in the back of the car lot, and there would be all their trade-ins.
Yeah.
And essentially, those were meant for the salvage yard.
Yeah.
And it would cost that dealer, it cost him $150 to get a salvage truck out there to take it away. A car with 70,000 miles, all the options, great condition. They pay to get rid of it. So I'd go back and I'd say, well, I'll pay you $200 for it. And they, sure, take it away. The only question was like, how are you going to do that? You're not even Japanese.
Right.
You're out here wherever. But you and I, we got pretty good at Japanese. And so well, I was one of very few who, even in that group of guys, the Pakistanis, who could actually speak Japanese. I kind of set myself apart in that way. They trusted me.
Yeah.
And so I decided, I'm going to go out to my own market, which was Akita area, northern Japan. There were no Pakistanis out there fighting for the cars. So it was all mine. And I got all these Japanese map books. Back then there was no Google mapping or anything like that. It was just, you got a book and it was in Japanese. You had to be able to read Japanese. And I could tell, this was the used car. This was the used salvage yard. Over here was the new car lot. Always went to Toyota.
Yeah.
And
so let's talk about that for a second. So everything you were looking for was purely Toyota based, no Nissans, no Hondas, no Subaru, no nothing?
Not until I started working. I tried to open up the English market in England and Denmark. And that was more for your end user buyer, your individual buyer. And that was more your sporty type of cars.
Sure.
But
Caravans and shit.
You might have like a Miata, or Miatas were popular in England.
Yeah.
But no, it was all Toyotas, because Toyota had the key to Toyota is that no matter where you are in the world, you can get parts.
Yeah.
Right? That's the key is this is going to break down at some point. It's commercial use. It's a taxi. They're going to break down at some point, and these guys need to know how to jerry rig it. And the Toyotas were simple. They did not want to even talk about Nissan, Honda, Mitsubishi, Suzuki. Forget it. It was Toyota or nothing.
Yeah.
I'd be like, bro, I'll just sell it to you cheap. Nope, don't want it. Because it was just more of a headache.
Let's talk about the actual experience. So I had the opportunity to travel around with you one weekend in some rental car that you thoroughly thrashed. So I jumped in and we start trucking along. And so you're driving and you're looking at a map, reading it in Japanese, and you've got a phone in your ear. And then you're scouring the landscape for like, oh, there's the dealership, there's the behind the dealership, there's the junkyard. And you would do that for what, like 12 hours a day for like 3 or 4 days?
The more distance I could put on the car, the more cars I could buy that day.
Yeah.
I would just, I'd buy it. I'd give the guy cash.
Yeah.
And then I'd tell him there's a truck coming. Then at the end of the day, I would send a fax from whatever hotel or, spa that I was sleeping at. I'd send a fax to the Nissan trucking company. Well, it wasn't Nissan. That was just what they called themselves.
Yeah.
And they would go pick up the truck and the car and take it down to Tokyo, to Odaiba, the big port.
Yep.
And then we would go into a lot of the guy that I was selling to. So I knew the guys in Tokyo because of my friend. He introduced me to the guys. There were 100 guys. There were 2 of them you could trust.
Right.
He
So
introduced me to those 2 guys.
When the car was in the lot,
yeah,
down in Tokyo, did you own it at that point, or had you already sold it on?
I had sold it.
Okay, so you're like, how long would you own a car? Like, how many minutes would you own this car?
It would have. I knew who was buying it, and that person would have already agreed to buy it before I bought it.
Okay, so let's say you pull in. Let's say you pull in, you see like, shit, there's a Toyota Hilux. Because I remember you like specifically looking for the Hilux pickup trucks. And let's say you see one. What would have been like, you know, this is 1994, 95. What would you have paid for that? And what would you have sold it for in the course of 5 minutes?
So it would have been like, let's say it was 97, and I would have seen like an 89, 88 Hi-Ace, double door, white van. And I would know that those guys in Tokyo, Hamid or the other guy, Jacoby or something, he would pay $4,000 for that.
Yes, okay.
So I knew, look, I mean, what's it going to cost me to send it there? And what's the car going to cost? So, you know, I would basically negotiate as low a price as part. The lower I negotiated, the higher the profit for me.
Yeah.
Usually I'd get that car for $2,000, $2,500.
Yep.
And put it on the truck, and it would go down there. Then that guy would buy it for $4,000.
Yep.
And he would put it on a ship to Chile, for example.
Okay.
And that would be his cousin in Chile who'd buy it from him. I'd buy it for $2. The guy I sold it to $4, and that guy would sell it to his cousin for $8. And then they would sell it. They had like 200% tax or whatever. They could sell it for more than $10,000, $12,000. So that was for a Hi-Ace. Your typical Corolla, which was the bread and butter, you know, your little white Corolla, 4-door. That would go for, you know, I'd buy that for $500 to $800, sell it for $1,600 to $2,000. That guy would sell it for $4,000, and he'd sell it on the lot in Chile or Peru or Pakistan for, let's say, $8,000. Everybody made 100% profit. I was the only American in the group. Everybody else was speaking Urdu.
Yeah. But you're the one out there sourcing the cars, doing the actual farming.
Yeah. And so I, 10 hours, 12 hours to get back to your question.
Yeah.
I do a 17-day run, I remember. Or maybe it was 17. It was 17 cities in 10 days.
And you were living in Brazil at the time.
I was living in Brazil, which is exactly on the opposite side of the earth. 12-hour time difference.
Yeah.
So I like to say I had the longest commute in the world. You can't get longer than all the way around the world one time.
Yeah.
And I'd fly in 10 days. I'd fly up to Morioka, which was in Iwate or something like that.
Yep.
And then I'd rent the car there, and I'd do a full circle all the way over to Akita and then back over to Iwate. 10 days, 17 cities. It was brutal, wore me out, but I'd end up with 20, 30 cars on trucks back to Tokyo and then fly back home.
Yeah, nice. So I had the pleasure of dropping in on that experience one time, and I had a little bit of ecstasy with me, and I took that and I did this all day with Eric, and it was just Christ, something to see. And so I just wanted to share that with the folks at Hoonigan, just to if you're thinking about going to Japan and doing crazy stuff, like got some stories.
I remember, there was all kinds of markets. It wasn't just that group. That was the used car business. But then there was the used trucks, like like a refrigerator truck. The Russians loved those. They would come over on lumber ships that would deliver lumber from up in Siberia down to Japan. They'd end up in Okayama. Mm-hmm. And there was a guy there. He had a big lot, Pakistani, and the Russians would come. I'll never forget. Went out and had some sake with a Russian guy. He was definitely mafia. Yeah. And he carried, back in the day of the butt pack, he'd pull out his butt. We'd say, this car's 10,000. That truck is this and that. he'd pull out a wad of 100,000 US dollars from his butt pack and just, count it out and hand it over. Crazy. And then there were the Thais, and the Thais would come over and they would buy the cars and chop them up into pieces.
Oh, wow.
Engines and car doors and you name it, axles. And eventually those guys kind of killed the market for us whole car guys, because you could sell parts for much more per part than you could for the whole car. And so we kind of got driven out. That was the end for me.
When did you end doing that? What year was it?
99.
Okay. And you had mentioned the registration system, what they call shaken.
Right.
Has that changed?
God, I don't know.
Okay. So my question is the used car market in Japan still the same? Is it all these cars have to leave the country, or I don't actually know that.
So what happened was in the late 90s, they really started the auction system became more developed, which was that, I'd go to a guy on a lot and then he would say, oh, well, I can, up until, 99, I would come and I'd be the only buyer. I'd be the only guy who would be out in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
And, but by 99, they were getting calls from auction houses in Tokyo. And so now I'm competing with guys in Tokyo for that car out in the sticks. And, there would be Pakistani guys that would be in the auction houses buying them up there. So my margins started to get a lot smaller. And I'm sure the auction market now is huge with the internet. That was before the internet. So I'm sure it's very sophisticated now.
Cool. Well,
they still have that culture of new cars. New car is everything to them. So
that's right.
Used cars are not like the way we are here.
Yeah. Well, cool, Eric. Thank you so much for your time. You get a Hoonigan T-shirt coming in the mail.
That's it.
Maybe some for your kids too. But hey, I appreciate it.